They all laughed when the janitor entered the practice room, mud on her shoes, broom in hand, and eyes fixed on the grand piano. A student even whispered, "She probably thinks it's a vending machine." But they didn't know who she used to be, or what she was about to play. When her fingers touched the keys, the room froze. What was a cleaning lady doing playing a piece no one had ever heard, but could never forget? And why did the director look like he'd seen a ghost? No one knew her name. At the Eastern Conservatory of Performing Arts, the cleaning lady was just another background presence. She wore the same dark uniform every night, pushed the same squeaky cart of mops and trash bags, and moved like a ghost through the gilded hallways. The students, glittering in tuxedos and silk gowns, never made eye contact. The professors didn't either. If someone spilled a coffee on marble floors or left empty takeout boxes in the practice rooms, it just disappeared the next day, thanks to her. That was her magic, they joked. But no one ever thought to ask where that magic came from. Her name was Mara. She was 58 years old, had graying hair she always tied into a bun, and eyes so tired they seemed older than her body. But when she passed the music rooms, her pace slowed. Every time she heard a cello tremble or a violin cry, her hand lingered on the doorframe, just for a second, like she was remembering something. And when she came to the grand piano room, the one with the chandelier and polished floor, she always paused the longest. She never played it. She never touched it. But she looked at it like it held a secret only she could understand. Mara had taken the job at the conservatory 10 years earlier. She kept to herself, never late, never loud, always cleaning with quiet precision. At home, her apartment was silent. No TV, no photos on the walls. Just a dusty upright piano in the corner with a cracked middle C key. She hadn't played it in years. Not since the accident. Not since the day her world cracked in half like that broken key. Her son, David, was the last person to hear her play. Years ago, Mara had been a name whispered in musical circles. Not as a performer, but as a composer. Her pieces were played in small halls, admired for their emotion. Then came David, born with perfect pitch, playing sonatas by ear at age 6. Music was their language. But when he died on a rainy highway en route to his first competition, Mara stopped speaking that language forever. She stopped writing, stopped playing, stopped living. The only job she could take that didn't ask about her past was cleaning. And where better to hide than in a place where music was everywhere? But no one looked too closely. Still, something stirred when she passed the piano. Every day she resisted. But some nights, when no one was around, she sat on the bench, not to play, but just to sit. She would place her fingers above the keys, breathe in the silence, and imagine what the notes would sound like if she dared press them. But then she'd stand, pick up her mop, and vanish down the corridor like a shadow. No one knew Mara used to write music that made grown men cry. No one knew her son once dreamed of winning gold at that very conservatory. And no one knew the pain that lived inside the woman sweeping the very stage where others chased glory. But all of that was about to change. One night, a door would be left open. One key would call her name. And the sound that came from her hands would echo far beyond the halls of Eastern Conservatory. It was a Thursday evening, just after 7. A storm rolled over the conservatory, sending rain against the tall arched windows like soft fingers tapping a warning. The building was mostly empty. Most classes had ended, and only a few dedicated students remained, rehearsing late into the night for the upcoming spring showcase. Mara had started her shift like usual, moving her cart down the polished marble hallway, her steps muffled by the worn soles of her black shoes. She had no idea that this night would change everything. As she approached the main hall, she saw the door to the grand recital room cracked open, light spilling into the dark corridor. It was unusual. Normally, this room was locked by now. But curiosity tugged at her, and she quietly peeked inside. Inside, a student named Callum was seated at the grand piano, his fingers flying angrily over the keys. Callum was a senior, famous among the students for being arrogant and technically brilliant. He was rehearsing a difficult modern composition, but the left G key wasn't responding. He struck it again and again, slamming the key harder each time, as if violence would wake it up. "Useless," he muttered, standing up with a huff. His friends lounged nearby, laughing, not taking the session seriously. One of them noticed Mara standing in the doorway and elbowed Callum. "Hey, the cleaning lady's here. Maybe she can fix the piano with her mop." The others chuckled, and Callum turned, smirking. "You hear that, Maria? You know pianos, right? Maybe you can work your magic and clean some talent into it." Mara didn't say a word. She simply lowered her eyes, stepped back, and continued down the hallway as they laughed behind her. Her name wasn't Maria. It was Mara. But no one ever asked. She returned to her cart and finished cleaning the other classrooms. But that broken key, something about it stayed in her mind. It was the same note her son used to play to open every composition. Gee, as she wheeled her cart past the recital room again an hour later, the hallway was quiet. The door was still ajar. The room was dark now, the students long gone. Only the sound of the storm outside remained. She hesitated, heart pounding. And then, as if in a trance, she stepped inside. The piano sat alone under the faint glow of the exit sign. She approached slowly, like walking toward something sacred. She placed her hand on the edge of the piano, and for a moment, everything went still. Then, she sat down. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She hadn't played in over a decade. Her hands trembled. But when she touched the first note, something inside her cracked open. The sound was soft, hesitant. Then came the next. And the next. Her fingers found a rhythm that had been buried but not forgotten. The broken G key added a subtle hum to the melody, like a ghost harmonizing with her. She played one of her old compositions, a piece she'd written with David when he was just 9. It was slow, haunting, filled with pain and beauty. Every note told a story of loss, of love, of things unsaid. What Mara didn't know was that someone else was there. A second janitor, Leo, had come back to grab his forgotten gloves. He froze in the hallway when he heard the music. Peeking into the recital room, he saw Mara at the piano, eyes closed, lost in the moment. He knew her only as the quiet woman who never spoke, always finished her shift early, and avoided conversation. But what he saw now made his jaw drop. He pulled out his phone and hit record, capturing 2 minutes of her playing before quietly stepping away. The next morning, Leo uploaded the video to a small music community page, tagging it, "Mystery Woman Plays Her Soul at Eastern Conservatory." He didn't expect anything to happen. By lunchtime, the video had 30,000 views. By evening, it had crossed 500,000. Comments poured in, "Who is she? This brought me to tears. Why is she not performing at Carnegie Hall?" Students began whispering. Professors started asking questions. The head of the music department forwarded the video to every faculty member. The director of the conservatory locked his office door and watched it on loop. But Mara didn't know. She arrived that evening with her mop, her gloves, and her silence, unaware that her life was no longer her own. That night, someone left the recital room open again. But this time, Mara didn't enter. She passed by, felt the pull in her chest, but she kept walking. Something had shifted. She could feel it in the way students stared as she passed. In the way staff who never noticed her now nodded awkwardly in the halls. She didn't know the video was playing in dorm rooms, in offices, in classrooms. She didn't know that her music had lit a spark. But she would soon find out. Because the conservatory didn't take kindly to secrets. And the spotlight doesn't care if you're ready. By the end of the week, Mara's video had exploded beyond the music community. News outlets picked it up under headlines like "Unknown Janitor Leaves Conservatory Speechless" and "Hidden Genius at Eastern Arts." Still, Mara had no idea. She had no social media, no internet at home, and spent her breaks in silence. But the conservatory wasn't quiet anymore. Her face, captured in the dim light of the recital hall, had been frozen in time, mid-performance, circulating in thousands of shares. The students who used to walk past her now whispered and stared. Some smiled in admiration. Others narrowed their eyes in confusion or envy. Mara started to feel it everywhere. In the sudden hush that followed her footsteps, the extra glances, the silence from staff members who had never spoken to her before but now seemed to look through her. That Monday morning, she was called into the administrative office. It was the first time anyone at Easton had asked to meet her for anything other than scheduling changes. The assistant director, Ms. Langford, waited with a thin smile. "We'd like to discuss your recent performance," she said, tapping her pen. Mara blinked, confused. "I don't perform," she replied, still unaware. Ms. Langford turned her laptop and played the video. Mara saw herself on screen, hands moving over the keys, eyes closed. Her chest tightened. "Who recorded this?" she asked softly. "That doesn't matter now," Ms. Langford said. "It's been seen over 3 million times. The public is fascinated. They want to know who you are." Mara shook her head. "I didn't mean for anyone to hear that. I was alone." Langford's tone changed, more businesslike. "Be that as it may, this is now a PR situation. You are employed by this institution, and this video has associated your actions with us. Some believe it reflects positively. Others do not." Within hours, a heated debate unfolded behind closed doors. Some faculty wanted to celebrate Mara and offer her a chance to perform at the upcoming showcase. Others saw it as inappropriate, an untrained custodian upstaging trained students and professionals. The director, Mr. Whitmore, had the strongest opinion. "This conservatory is a place of order and discipline. Allowing her on stage sends the wrong message. We are not a talent show." His voice echoed in the faculty boardroom, fists clenched. But behind his words was something deeper, something personal. He remembered her. Not right away. But after watching the video several times, it hit him. The style. The emotion. He dug into old competition records, dusty archives, and found it. Mara Bell, 1993, finalist in a National Young Composers Showcase. A name that had vanished years ago. A name he once rejected during an early application round. He had told her she was too sentimental to succeed in a modern program. That memory haunted him now. Meanwhile, Mara stood at a crossroads. Her co-workers, Leo, the janitor who had recorded her, and several others, encouraged her to go public. "You have a gift," Leo told her. "This is your second chance." But Mara wasn't sure she wanted it. She hadn't played for anyone since David died. She wasn't ready to reopen that part of her soul. At home, she stared at the dusty piano in the corner of her apartment. Her hand hovered over the lid but didn't lift it. The silence in the room pressed against her chest like a weight. She felt like a fraud, a ghost of who she once was. Every step toward the spotlight felt like betrayal of her son, her grief, and the quiet world she had built to survive. Then came the letter. Slipped into her locker at work. No return address. Just a folded note on white paper with 3 words in neat handwriting. "Play for him." Mara's hands trembled as she held it. No one knew about her son. She never spoke of him. She had no family left. But someone knew. Someone had seen the pain in her music. That note became a spark. She returned to the conservatory late that night. The recital room was locked, but the small practice room on the 3rd floor wasn't. She stepped inside, sat at the older upright piano, and played. Not for the crowd. Not for the internet. For David. For herself. The next day, she agreed to perform one piece at the spring showcase. The announcement caused chaos. Some students were angry. "She didn't earn this," one said. "She's not even enrolled," said another. A few professors resigned from the event in protest. But others were inspired. A quiet momentum built around Mara, one that no rulebook could stop. Still, the director remained opposed, and tension boiled under the surface. He issued a last-minute restriction. Mara could perform, but only if she composed an original piece to be approved in advance. A test. A trap. But Mara accepted. She sat down at her old piano at home, pulled out a faded sheet from years ago, and began to write again. Not just any song. David's song. The last piece they had worked on together before he died. The one she never finished. She added to it now, new sections filled with sorrow and healing, with silence and storm. Every night, she played and revised, tears falling silently onto the keys. And in the heart of that piece, she planted her truth. Not just music, but memory. Not just pain, but peace. It would be her voice. Her confession. Her goodbye. 2 days before the showcase, the conservatory was buzzing with energy. Students rushed through rehearsals, rooms were double-booked, and staff scrambled to prepare for the most anticipated event of the year. But beneath the chaos, a quiet war brewed. Mara's name was now on the event flyer, listed as guest performer, original composition. Her face, however, was not. Some said it was an oversight. Others suspected it was intentional. But Mara didn't care. She wasn't doing this for recognition. She was doing it for David. For the music that had been locked inside her for so long. Still, she could feel the resistance like a cold draft in every hallway. Doors didn't stay open for her like they used to. Conversations stopped when she walked by. The director avoided her entirely, even cancelling 2 meetings he was supposed to have with her about her piece. But on the afternoon before the performance, she received a summons. A note taped to her locker, asking her to come to the director's office. She almost didn't go. But something told her it was time. Mr. Whitmore sat behind his wide oak desk, back straight, fingers clasped tightly. His eyes didn't carry the usual sharpness. Instead, they looked tired. "Sit," he said. Mara remained standing. Silence stretched between them. Then, in a voice quieter than she expected, he said, "I know who you are." Mara didn't respond. "I remember your submission," he continued. "Decades ago. A composition with no title. Just a number. Entry 147. Her breath caught in her throat. "I told you your work was too emotional. That it lacked structure. That it wouldn't connect with modern audiences." He looked down, ashamed. "I've thought about that a lot since watching that video. I was wrong." Mara stayed silent, her heart thudding in her ears. He stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out an old manila folder. From it, he slid out a weathered score sheet, her original submission from all those years ago. The notes were faint, written in pencil, with soft curves and marks only she could have made. Her hands trembled slightly. "Why now?" she asked. Whitmore sighed. "Because I've built a place where people wear masks. Where credentials mean more than heart. And you tore through all of it with one performance." Then his tone changed, colder now. "But there's still a problem. Your piece, David's song, it's not approved. It's not on the program list. You haven't submitted it for review." Mara stared at him. "You told me I had to write something original. You never said you needed to see it." He walked back behind his desk. "That was the deal, Mara. And without it, I'll have to pull you from the showcase." She didn't move. "You just said I changed everything." "And you did," he replied. "But this is still a school. Rules matter." Mara stepped forward, pulling a folded sheet of music from her coat. She laid it on the desk between them. "This is it. The original. I didn't make copies. I didn't digitize it. If you're going to reject it, you'll have to read it from here." Whitmore reached out but paused. "I won't read it," he said quietly. "Because if I do, I'll ruin it again. Just play it. Let them hear what I couldn't." She took the paper back, nodded, and walked out. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She sat by the old upright piano in her apartment, staring at the keys. Her son's picture sat on top of the piano, faded at the edges. In it, he was smiling, mid-laugh, holding a trophy from a school recital. The last one he ever attended. She remembered the call. The headlights. The waiting room. The silence from the doctor. And how, when she got home that night, she tried to play but couldn't. Her hands had frozen. The keys felt like glass. Now, after all these years, she was going to finish what they had started. The next day, she arrived at the conservatory early. The sun hadn't even risen yet. She slipped into the empty recital hall and approached the piano. It had been tuned overnight, polished to a mirror shine. She sat down and placed the music sheet gently on the stand. Her fingers hovered over the keys, but she didn't press them. Not yet. She just breathed, in and out, letting the silence wrap around her. For a moment, she could almost feel David beside her. Not as a ghost, but as a presence. A warmth. Then the doors creaked open behind her. Leo entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee and a proud grin. "You ready?" he asked. She turned, smiled softly, and nodded. Almost. Backstage later that evening, Mara waited in the wings as the final student act finished. Applause filled the hall. Then the announcer's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest joining us tonight. Please welcome Mara Bell." The room fell quiet. She stepped into the light. As she walked to the piano, her eyes scanned the crowd. Students. Faculty. Whitmore. Some faces looked confused. Others surprised. But most were simply curious. She sat down, took one final breath, and began to play. And in that moment, the truth of who she was, who she had always been, finally had a voice. The room was silent as Mara's fingers touched the keys. There was no introduction, no fanfare, no spoken words. Just the deep, quiet breath she took before letting her hands move, and with that breath, the music began. It wasn't loud or fast. It didn't aim to impress. It simply existed, soft and slow, like water trickling over stones. Each note carried a memory, each chord a buried piece of her heart. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure what they were hearing at first. Some leaned forward. Others closed their eyes. Within moments, the energy in the room changed. The people who once whispered about the cleaning lady now sat frozen, captivated by something they couldn't name. The composition began with a lullaby, a quiet melody that tiptoed across the octaves like a child's laugh echoing down a hallway. It grew bolder, then softer again, weaving emotion through silence and sound like thread through fabric. Mara didn't rush. She let every note breathe. The broken places in the song weren't mistakes. They were part of the story. A deliberate pause here, a sudden swell there. She was telling them everything without saying a word. About the son she lost. The years she spent cleaning floors instead of filling concert halls. About guilt, grief, and grace. And somehow, through the music, everyone listening felt it too. Midway through the piece, something shifted. Her hands moved into the section David had helped compose, the part that used to make him laugh when they played it together. It was joyful, full of quick runs and playful skips, like a dance. A few audience members smiled, recognizing the contrast. But then came the silence. A deep, raw silence that stretched for several beats. Mara's hands hovered, motionless. The audience didn't dare move. She pressed down on a low G key, broken in that old practice room, but perfect here. And the piece continued, slower now, deeper. This was the part she had written alone. After the crash. After the world had gone quiet. The notes didn't weep, they confessed. And as the melody built, layer upon layer, something unexplainable happened. People began to cry. Not just one or two. Whole rows. A professor clutched his chest. A student gripped the edge of her seat. Even the skeptical ones, the ones who rolled their eyes at her name on the flyer, sat still, mouths parted, faces pale. They weren't just hearing music. They were experiencing something deeper. A life. A loss. A moment they would never forget. And in the back of the room, near the shadows of the curtain, Director Whitmore stood alone, tears streaming down his face. He had rejected her once, dismissed her heart as weakness. But now, in front of everyone, he knew he had been wrong. This wasn't weakness. This was strength. This was what music was meant to do. When the final note played, Mara lifted her hands and let the sound fade naturally into the hall. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply stood up and stepped away from the piano. The audience didn't clap at first. They couldn't. No one wanted to break the silence. It was sacred. Then, someone stood. A single pair of hands clapping. Then another. And another. Soon, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applause thundering through the room like a wave. But Mara didn't bask in it. She walked backstage, her face calm, her eyes misty. Leo met her there, speechless. She nodded at him, then quietly left through the side door, unnoticed by most, leaving behind a stage that still hummed with the echo of her soul. By the next morning, The conservatory's website had changed. Mara Bell was now listed not as guest performer, but as composer in residence. Her performance had been uploaded in full to the conservatory's official page, and views soared past 1 million in just hours. Students began leaving letters for her in the janitorial break room. Some asked for lessons. Others just wanted to say thank you. Mara never responded to the comments online, never gave interviews. But she returned to the conservatory the next evening, mop in hand, resuming her usual shift. She didn't want the spotlight. She had faced it once, and that was enough. The music had spoken. That was all she needed. And yet something had changed. Professors held doors open for her. Students greeted her by name. The halls felt warmer. The walls softer. One night, she walked past the grand piano and found a student playing one of her pieces from the recital. He looked up, startled, and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," but Mara just smiled and said, "Play it again. This time, slower." Her name wasn't just known now. It was respected. Not because she asked for it, but because she earned it. One song. One moment. That's all it took. She had lived in silence for so long. But now, even when she wasn't playing, the conservatory echoed with the sound of her truth. Weeks passed. The spring showcase faded from memory for most, replaced by new projects, new recitals, and new faces wandering the conservatory halls. But the ripple Mara had created didn't disappear. It moved quietly, like her, shifting the air in ways that weren't always visible but were deeply felt. The janitor who was once invisible had become a symbol of something unspoken, a reminder that talent, pain, and grace don't wear badges or titles. They hide in plain sight, waiting for a moment to breathe. Students stopped walking past cleaning staff without a glance. They started holding doors, saying thank you, leaving notes of encouragement near the bulletin boards. Some even left sheet music, unsigned, hoping Mara would read it. But Mara never returned to the stage. She came back each night like she always had, cart and gloves, mops, and polish. She kept the recital hall pristine, wiping down the very piano she had once made sing. People asked her why. Some begged her to perform again. Invitations poured in from outside the conservatory. Music schools, festivals, even major orchestras offering to perform her piece. She declined them all. Politely. Firmly. She had played what she needed to. She had spoken. That was enough. Fame wasn't her goal. Healing was. And sometimes healing doesn't come with applause. It comes in the form of peace. Director Whitmore approached her once more, this time with something different in his eyes. Not authority, but understanding. He didn't speak about the showcase. Instead, he handed her a folded sheet. It was a program design draft for the next semester's student concert. At the bottom, in bold letters, it read, "Mara Bell, original composition, closing piece." She shook her head. "I told you, I'm not performing again." He nodded. "I know. But I thought maybe you'd consider letting someone else play it." She looked down at the paper for a long time. Then, without a word, she handed it back. Not yes. Not no. Just a quiet maybe. Leo, the janitor who started it all with one video, became something of a legend himself. Students stopped him for selfies. Faculty treated him like a bridge between worlds. But he never took credit. When asked, he always said the same thing, "All I did was press record." She's the one who opened her soul. He and Mara never spoke much about the night she played. They didn't have to. Some things are too big for words. Their friendship deepened not through stories, but through shared silence. The kind of silence that held music inside it. One evening, well after the building had emptied, Mara stood again in the recital room. She didn't sit at the piano. She didn't play. She just looked at it, her reflection faint in the polished wood. Then, she turned to leave, but noticed something taped to the bench. A small plaque, recently installed. It read, "For the unheard voices. May they one day be heard." Her hand brushed the metal, and for a moment, her eyes glistened. She hadn't asked for recognition. But someone had listened anyway. Over time, her presence became a quiet legend. New students heard the story in whispers. The tale of the cleaning lady who once played a song that made the entire building stop. Some thought it was exaggerated. Others searched for the video. But it had been taken down by Mara's request. She didn't want her story to live online. She wanted it to live in memory, passed down through conversation, through the kind of or that couldn't be clicked or shared. And that's exactly what happened. The story stayed alive not on screens, but in the hush of the hallways, in the respect students gave to every person in the building, and in the sudden silence that sometimes filled the recital room when someone sat at the piano and thought of her. At home, Mara's life was quiet, but not lonely. The photo of her son still sat on the piano. But now, beside it, rested a new composition notebook. Not filled yet. Just a few lines. A few ideas. Some nights, she'd open it, scribble a melody, and close it again. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't chasing anything. For the first time in years, she felt like herself. Not the version broken by loss. Not the one hiding in the shadows. Just Mara. A woman who had once lived in silence and, for one unforgettable moment, made the world listen. And though she never played publicly again, those who heard her that night would say they still heard the echo. Not in recordings. Not in repeats. But in the way they approached their art. In the way they looked at the world. In the way they remembered that brilliance doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it mops the floor beside you. Sometimes, it walks the halls when no one is looking. And sometimes, it only needs one chance to remind everyone that greatness can come from anywhere, even from someone everyone else overlooked.